The Boston Bruins got some great goaltending and have a 1-0 lead over the Toronto Maple Leafs in their best-of-7 playoff series. Ian McLaren of Locked On Boston Bruins joins us to discuss what happened in Game 1 and what to look for going forward. All that and more next on the Locked On NHL Podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Gil Martin here, and welcome everybody to the Monday edition of the Locked On NHL Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On NHL your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you can get new episodes as soon as they drop. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150, win or lose. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. It is my pleasure to welcome back to the show the host of Locked On Boston Bruins, Ian McLaren. And Ian, you and the Bruins have got to be very pleased with the outcome of Game 1. What was the biggest difference in that seemingly one-sided victory?
I mean, the biggest difference is one of the strengths for the Bruins all season long, and that was goaltending. There was some question as to who would start Game 1, as the Bruins have been rotating goalies all season long. Linus Ullmark kind of outplayed Jeremy Swayman down the stretch post-trade deadline, but Jeremy Swayman had been excellent against Toronto all season long. He got the start in Game 1, and he was excellent in net, stopping 35 of 36 shots against, and really helped to. And that's what the Maple Leafs playing without William Nylander as well. They were still able to generate a bunch of shots, but the Bruins were able to keep them at bay thanks to Jeremy Swayman, and they were able to take advantage of some leaky goaltending at the other end of the ice. I was saying coming into this series, that was going to be one of the big differentiators between these two teams. I kind of joked on social media that neither team had announced a Game 1 starter, and that's because Boston had two number one goalies and the Leafs didn't even have one, perhaps, and that proved to be true in Game 1 for sure. That was the big differentiator.
What do you see the Bruins doing going forward? Are they going to continue to alternate? Do they ride the hot hand in Swayman?
That's a big question, and it's still a bit unclear. General manager Don Sweeney said they had a plan coming into the playoffs. Didn't reveal that, of course, but whether it is to the huge debate right up until puck drop for Game 2 will be whether or not to stick with the hot hand in Jeremy Swayman or to stick with what worked all through the regular season, and that is pretty much a game-to-game rotation between Swayman and Ullmark. I'm of the mind that you stay with Swayman, especially since how he has owned Toronto back through the regular season as well. But there's something to be said for mixing it up and sticking with that rotation. My idea for the rotation in the playoffs was you start one guy, and at the earliest sign of trouble, you don't hesitate to go with the next guy. So that's kind of how I see it. As long as Swayman is performing, winning, then I say you stick with them. But if the Leafs get a bunch early in Game 2 or they're able to win Game 2, go back to Linus Ullmark for Game 3 and see how that works out. So again, I think it'll be Swayman, but we won't know probably right until warm-ups when the first goalie comes on the ice.
Talk to me about the importance of the power play in Game 1 and then the two goals, obviously, with the man advantage by Jake DeBrusk.
Yeah, huge. That has been a real struggle for the Bruins over the past couple of months, finding balance between the two units. The unit that was successful in Game 2 was actually the quote unquote second unit for this group at the moment. On the first unit, you had guys like Pat Maroon, Kevin Shattenkirk, But it was the second unit with Charlie McAvoy, Brad Marchand, Jake DeBrusk that really exploded. And you had Jake DeBrusk, who has a reputation for coming up big against the Maple Leafs in the playoffs, scoring 2 goals. He, too, had been pretty quiet over the past several weeks. So it's huge for his confidence, huge for the power play confidence in general, taking advantage of some of those. Yeah, a lot of the talk for the Maple Leafs was how they added all this grit in Ryan Reeves, Max Domi, Tyler Bertuzzi, but it kind of came back to bite them in game 1 on the opening goal. You had Ryan Reeves jumping in as the extra man, hitting a guy and leaving the Bruins for a 2-on-1. You had Max Domi taking a bad slashing penalty against Brad Marchand, and he was called out by Coach Sheldon Keefe for that. So as long as the Bruins can continue to get under Toronto's skid and get the advantage in terms of power play time and taking advantage of those opportunities as well, then it should be a bonus for the Bruins for sure.
You mentioned 2 things. You mentioned Pat Maroon earlier. You mentioned getting under the Maple Leafs skin. What impact has he had on this team since his acquisition?
I mean, yeah, he's only played a few games up to this point, but he was very much a presence in game 1, setting the tone by sending Leafs defenseman Timothy Liljegren into the Bruins bench. He's just there was a couple of times where there was some scrums after the whistle, and you could see him just kind of smiling at the Leafs who are trying to get under his skin. He's been there. He knows how to succeed in the playoffs. He knows how to toe that line. And I mean, if you had told me 5 years ago that the Bruins would be embracing Pat Maroon, it would be, I wouldn't believe myself, but here we are. He's becoming a fan favorite already. You can tell his experience is rubbing off on the team, and yeah, he's not going to play a huge role in terms of offense or driving possession or anything like that, but he's certainly going to make an impact when he's on the ice. And like I mentioned, he is getting some power play time as a net front presence. So who knows? Maybe he'll be able to pop 1 or 2 in here.
How do you slow down the Maple Leafs over a series like this? I mean, so many weapons on that team, especially at the top of the lineup. What's the strategy and how well did it work considering how many shots on goal they had in game 1?
Yeah, I mean, it worked out all right. They did have probably Toronto's best opportunity. Didn't even count as a shot on goal because Auston Matthews had a wide open cage from a sharp angle and hit the post on that one. That could have been a turning point in the game. I think it was only 1-0 or 2-1 at that point. William Nylander wasn't in the lineup. It was really, they did have a lot of shots, but Jeremy Swayman was really able to cut down on any rebounds, and they weren't necessarily the highest danger chances. You didn't have to make necessarily a ton of difficult saves or stand on his head. So the Bruins are relying heavily on Charlie McAvoy, Hampus Lindholm, Brandon Carlo to shut these guys down. And funny enough, it was Brandon Carlo who not only helped shut them down, but he also got what stood as the game-winning goal as well. So, as long as they can keep them kind of to the outside and limit Auston Matthews specifically, keep him off the board, then the Bruins, should be all right.
And any other keys to victory for this series that you wanted to set forth right now?
Yeah, I mean, in game 1, secondary scoring was huge. That was a key for me coming into the series. Goaltending, we didn't see David Pastrnak really pop up in this one. I think that is a key. Obviously, he can't stay off the board for a whole series and the Bruins win. So I expect a pretty big game for him coming up. Face-offs were a big concern for me as well. The Bruins had not been a good face-off team, but they did recall John Beecher, who was their second best face-off guy when he played in the regular season. And I believe the Bruins did have the advantage in the face-off dot, and Beecher opened the scoring as well. So, you couldn't have scripted a better game 1 for the Bruins. I still expect it will be a long series, far from over, but so far, so very good for the Bruins.
All right, Ian, why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find the podcast and where they could find you on social media?
Yeah, Locked On Boston Bruins, available on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. And people can find the podcast on social media at Locked NHL Bruins. And they can find me at Ian C. McLaren.
All right, Ian, thanks so much. Always a pleasure.
Yeah, no problem, Gil.
Today's episode is brought to you by Policygenius. Policygenius is the country's leading online insurance marketplace. It saves you time and money so you can provide your family with a financial safety net starting today. With Policygenius, you can find life insurance policies that start at just $292 per year for $1 million worth of coverage, and some options offer same-day approval and avoid unnecessary medical exams. Policygenius helps you compare your options from top companies, and their team of licensed experts is on hand to help talk you through it. Talk to a team of award-winning agents who will walk you through the process step by step. It's easy to compare quotes from America's top insurers in just a few clicks so you could find the lowest price. Check life insurance off your to-do list in no time with Policygenius. Head to policygenius.com/lockedonnhl or click on the link in the description to get your free life insurance quotes and see how much you could save. That's policygenius.com/lockedonnhl.